Let me remind that we have launched a series of webinars dedicated to SDK Wialon development. We will mainly talk about the remote API method, but we also talk about JavaScript API. We have already hosted several webinars on different topics dedicated to remote API method. For those who have not watched yet the previous videos and joined us only today, you can find all the previous SDK webinars on our YouTube channel. Moreover, all the recordings of Gurtam meetups and webinars are available on our YouTube channel, including from the last season. By the way, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the bell button to get notifications every time when we upload new helpful videos. So, the webinar will be important and useful primarily to those who want to start work with Wialon SDK development. What is it, how to start working with it, and what you need to know for this. In other words, webinars will be useful for both technical specialists and developers who need to understand and start working with the Wialon SDK, and for other specialists, for example, like business analysts who need to set tasks for the developers for some points, to describe some points. I think for those who have already working with SDK closely and have their own working application, maybe the topics covered on webinars will be not so difficult, maybe familiar and not entirely new. But I hope even for experienced developers will be also some useful information, some new information. In any case, you can share your ideas, your suggestions of what you would like to discuss at webinars. Perhaps you have faced with some difficulties or need consultation on a specific topic. Please feel free, write to our forum for developers, where we have a separated thread that dedicated to the webinars. The link to it is in the description box below. You can also write in the YouTube chat during this webinar. So, as I said, there have already been several webinars on various topics, for example, like authorization in the system and events method, the methods which are special to get data and process it more faster. Webinars covers independent topics, so you can watch it in any order. But if you are new in Wialon, I'd recommend it to start with the first webinar, where we discussed about login and authorization in system by the token. All the webinars cover the development of remote API method. This method are applied in all our applications and other products. Remote API requests are mainly only way to receive data from Wialon. But today, this webinar, I will talk about JavaScript API method that can be also used in your JavaScript web application to receive and process data. So the webinar is an overview and useful for those who would like to start and understand the JavaScript API of Wialon. Today we will talk about the following points. How to authorize in the system, which is basic action before starting to receive data. Wialon Playground, which is a convenient and useful tool for working with the Wialon JS API, and a code sample to get data and display information on web page. The webinar will last for about an hour. I will show you an example of my code, various options how data can be displayed on the page. Again, all our webinars are primarily for those who start developing for Wialon. I would like to show you that everything is not so difficult, and even those who are not developers by profession, like me, for example, can use the API to receive and display information, and even can write a simple application. I'm sure it will be interesting. Feel free to ask questions in our YouTube channel. I will look through it after every section and in the end of the webinar. So let's go. JS API methods are essentially a wrapper for remote API method. As I said earlier, you can get data from Wialon only by sending a remote API request to the server using the POST method. There are no other ways. For example, you cannot use a SQL request to get data from Wialon. But we developed also separate methods, functions, for the JavaScript API, which give you access to the Wialon features through your web application, JS web application. And the JS API functions themselves request information from the Wialon database. Not all remote API methods have corresponding JS functions. For example, event methods that we discussed at the previous webinar don't have the same JS functions. In this case, you will need to execute the remote API request. So you need to send POST request from your application to Wialon with all required parameters. But even for this case, the JS API can help you. There is special function to execute remote request. I will show you this in my code later. But most of the methods are already in JS API. For example, authorization, working with session, get and set up properties for items, searching items, and etc. We will look at the examples of such methods, and I'm planning to share even more examples with you at the next webinar, which also will be dedicated to JavaScript API methods. So let's say a few words about the advantages of these methods. The advantages of these methods is that you need to specify only fewer parameters. Besides, when working with the Wialon JavaScript API, the available events requests are automatically sent to Wialon and used to maintain a session. Let me remind you that the session is held while the application sends a request to the server. As soon as the request stops being sent, the session is finished after 5 minutes. So automatically sending avail request helps you to hold your session. Let's move on the documentation and examples. We will look through and take a step by step what we need to work with the Wialon JS API. So now I will show you my screen. I hope you will see my screen well, and you can find all necessary documentation and information at our site sdk.wialon.com. Here is the section about JavaScript API documentation and JavaScript Playground. Let's open the JavaScript API documentation section. We will see the required information. The first section, the first information which you see, there is about a special file named Wialon.js. Is a special library which you need to connect before you start to work with JavaScript API. So you need to add this link, this URL, as a script in your HTML code. Here you can find an example. Then we can open the API documentation themselves. You can see that the structure is the same as most framework has. The documentation is generated automatically by a special framework, and there is a lot of not so useful information maybe, and most of all parameters and methods are described formalized and general. So if you need to get more detailed information, you need to go to remote API documentation to see which value, what means, and etc. But here you can find that Wialon JS API has several classes, like, for example, core, item, report, and etc. For example, we can open a class core and see what other classes it has. For example, session, class session. Then we can see what methods can be applied to this class session. And here, sure, you can click to open what method, what does method mean, which parameter means, and so on. But I think the most useful section for you will be Wialon Playground. Let's go to this section named JavaScript Playground. Just open it. You can remember this useful URL. Here you can find basic examples of JavaScript API, and sure, you can play with your code, run your examples, edit, and so on. So let me say a couple of words about this useful tool. And first, I'll also tell you about the capabilities of Wialon Playground, such as you can edit the code. Here's the code. You can download the code. You can save your version. You can save a fork. You can create a new fork and then save your version code in your fork. And also you can add useful libraries. Let's look through structure of this tool. On the left, you will see the list of the examples. You just click to any one and see what is the code, what will be the result, and so on. Here there is several sections. The section with HTML code, the section, let me show this one, the section with CSS style, and the section with JavaScript code, and the last section with the result. On the top panel, we can find useful buttons. Button add library needs to add several types of libraries like jQuery. We can add I click jQuery, and you can see that in HTML code has been added jQuery library. Then you can add, for example, Bootstrap library. Bootstrap framework is very useful and convenient framework. I use them everywhere. And for example, you can add the very useful library Wialon.js. Let me show you what is the problem, what can be with this one. I'm sorry. Let's open, for example, our console, and if I will delete, let's say everything. For example, I will delete these libraries, Wialon JS, and then I will try to run code. You can see that without library Wialon.js, I have get an error that Wialon class is not defined. So it's very important to add this library through the script to your HTML code. So as you see, I have added the code, then run it. So the button run just launch the example of code. Then you can press to get code. So you get full required information like HTML code plus JavaScript code plus CSS styles. You can play with CSS styles, with HTML, you can add required web elements, and so on. Another button, fork. Let me show the work of this button. For example, I can change the example. Let's look for example, get messages. I change the data length. For example, I would like to show only first 5 messages. So I change number to 5, and here also I change number to 5. I click button run. Then I get messages, load messages. You see there is a lot of messages, but now I'll get only 5 messages. Show messages. You see, I get only first 5 messages. 5 messages shown. Sure, I can change the value 2 to 5 also. But what I would like to show you is that I change the example of code, and then I can save this code. So you can see that there is new link which you can use, or for example send to other one, or for example open later and then edit your code. Or I can also click fork, and here will be new thread of my examples of code. And then if I press save, you can see that the file, the examples of code will be saved in my new fork, in my new thread. So it's very useful and convenient to play with code, to see how the JS function is used. Be sure that all function is working. So it's a real method which used in our system, in our applications, in Wialon, in our JS code. That's about Wialon Playground 2. I hope you understand the essence and the meaning of JS API now, and look through look through a little bit through documentation and Wialon Playground tool. And before we continue the webinar, let me see if there is any questions in the chat. Maybe we have someone new, someone. Okay, there is not questions in the chat, but before we have saved, let me see, some more questions in from our users sent to us on the forum. The questions is about is it possible to use Python? Yeah, sure, it's possible to use Python, but there is not dedicated to Wialon JS, Wialon JavaScript API. But sure, in Python code, you can also execute remote API requests to Wialon. So yeah, I think it's easy. But now we talk about JavaScript methods. Okay. So let's go. Next, we have practice in the playground, and we saw the code works, and we can already write scripts on our side using, for example, examples from Wialon Playground. We can save it in our file, save them on our servers, and start making small applications. But first, we need for our application is create an authorization page and log in to Wialon. Those who have watched our webinar on the authorization by tokens already know that authorization in the system is carried out through tokens. You can get the token on a special authorization page only. You must get first token via the special form. For those who did not watch that webinar, I will briefly remind you how tokens work, and then we will look at the code sample. You receive a token with several characteristics, lifetime, access rights, activation types, and etc. It's more secure to use a token with a limited lifetime and create a token when the previous one has expired. If every time when user authorizes in the system a new token is created, then the limit of 1000 tokens can be quickly reached. As a result, the user will not be able to log in at any application, even at Wialon or any other our application or your application. The same for access rights. It's better to specify token access rights depending on the tasks. For example, if it doesn't need to edit information, you can, for example, to get to view only summary reports, dashboards, charts. In this case, it's better to create a token with minimal access, only to view basic information like messages, reports, basic settings. In our documentation, you can find the description of all flag values for token. But please note, even if token has full access, a token never expands the current user's rights. So if user doesn't have access to edit settings or to view some sensitive information through your application, even on the token with the full rights, it will be not possible to execute such request. For example, the request to edit settings. The system will show you error 7, that means access is denied. Plus, you can always remove the user token from the system at any time, manually through the interface or by request under high-level user. I described about this topic, about tokens, more nuances in our previous webinar, so please look. The link will be in the description below. So let's move on the code. First, you need to write a code for the authorization in the system. You have seen, you can see in examples that there are several implementation options in Wialon Playground. Let's discuss them now. So we have at Playground 3 examples to authorization: token login for site, token usage in app, advanced authorization form. The purpose remains the same. You need to get token via the form and then use it to authorize into a system. Now we will look at example of my code and analyze it in more detail. So let's open my screen. I see, you can see on the screen. So the first example, which I would like to describe you about token usage in app. We can see the simple, the not so difficult code where we defined DNS of monitoring. Here I used our common DNS hosting.wialon.com, but sure, you can use your personal DNS. Then function get token create URL for login authorization page. Login authorization page is created as DNS plus login.html and optional parameters. Parameters are optional. If you don't pass these parameters into URL, they will have the default value. All parameters and all values are described in documentation. Then we add function add event listener to listen the messages which we receive, which will receive from new open window. Here we open this window using method window open. And then after we receive the token, we will use this token into login. Let's play with this example. I just click open login page. You see that new window with URL for Wialon hosting has been opened. So now here I pass my username and password, just remember it, and click authorize. Oh, sorry, not invalid password. Let's mirror check. Oh, fine. And here we get our token with which we have login. Just click logout. So again, we can open the page and login with another one user. There is convenient, simple, and always working options. So let me show you how I was implemented to my my simple application. Oh, sorry, I have a little. I have a URL for my application, like this one, and then again I click login, open the window, new window. I add username and password. Okay, yes, authorize HTTP, and I go to my app to my app inside and view information related to my app. Let's open the code. Stationery. Let's open the code. Here is the same. You could see that I have used the same examples from Wialon Playground. Just maybe I only change my HTML code as I use another elements, another web elements, another another CSS style. So but the principle is the same. I open new window with authorization form, and then get token and login with it. The other example I would like to show is if the tokens have already been created in the database, you can already use them for login. For example, it's useful to use local storage, which is your web browser storage, or you can save a database file in a database file on your server. But I will show you example with local storage to save token in the local storage. So let's open new app. You can see we can check local storage from our web browser for if there is a property token in our local storage. Yeah, so here I have already logged into this app, and now you can see that I click login button, and there is not open additional window with form authorization because the token is already in local storage. Okay, so I log in into another app. Let's look from the code. -js, yes, -js. So here I add a condition to check if local storage property token has token value. Their code will be used, their token value saved in local storage. If no, the code launch to open a new window, the same like in previous example. So, and the basic way is the same. The URL for DNS is openit plus login.html plus additional parameters like access type. For example, here you can see that I defined value 1, or for example, duration time, the lifetime of token, flex value, and etc. For example, client ID, your application name, you can specify your application name. The same for function token received. When I listen and receive token, I will log in from I will log in. So receive token will be get from a new parent window, but in only case if there is no token in local storage. So in this case, you can already execute a function login token, method login token, to log in into the system. And one more example, which show you login implementation by clicking on the icon, and we will redirect a user to the authorization form with customized CSS style. Let me show you such example. Here one, for example, if I load again, you can see there is already, we have fields to put username and password and button authorize. In this example, I will add authorization form in the my web page, as a iframe. It's also described in our documentation about token authorization, so you can easily do it for your application. The same is done for all our applications. And here I just specify already iframe with CRC, with URL for my authorization form, which is DNS plus login HTML plus all required parameters for token. And now when I log in, yes, so you can see there is not any additional window, or there is not it doesn't need to save token in local storage. You can save token also in local storage, for example, to prevent create new token every time when user login. But you have already customized form authorization. Let's look through the code. Oops, intro HTML. Yes. So you can see here that there is several of div elements with sections, with required sections, and then one of div contains the iframe with our login form, and here just specify required URL for our login form. You can use this example also in your app. Please note all links to code, to example, to samples of some like templates, web templates. You can find in the description box below. Everything is saved, and you will be available, and the code will be available for you. Just here about a few words about CSS. There is just useful parameters CSS URL, where I defined my CSS style for login HTML. In first webinar about authorization into Wialon, I show an example how to specify the CSS style, some life hacks, how to specify correct CSS style. For example, like I can show you this one. Here I open login form HTML with custom CSS style. Like I have add background, I change button colors, fonts, and etc. Sure, here for this web page I applied another CSS style, so you can do the same. So you can see that also all examples you can find in Wialon Playground and test them, play with them to understand how they working. Wialon Playground for this is very useful to understand how the methods are working, what information they need, what parameters they need, and what information they can get you. The options for implementation may vary. I hope you have got the gist of it. The token, the first token, must be obtained exactly through the form. by manually entering the Wialon username and password. As you see, I entered my username and my password. In the future, you can work with this token, save it in the local storage, web storage, or as an option, you can save the token in database on your site. Perhaps later you can delete this token or, for example, change this token, for example, change duration for this token. It depends on your tasks. If there is token not in local storage, or for example, in your file, or token, for example, has been expired, you just then redirect the user to the authorization page again, just to open new window, or for example, open a web page with customized form which embedded to your parent web page of your application. Next, in the login method, you use the value which you received as a token after authorization from the form. And after you log in with token, you can already work in the current session, execute request to the database for your tasks. So there is one way to use tokens and login. We have one more options to log in into the system. There is using a one-time authorization hash. In the description below, you can find the link to this particular request, how to create authorization hash and how to use it. The point is that you can create a temporary authorization hash and then use it for login instead token. For example, please note that generated hash is available during first 2 minutes after its creation. So when you create authorization hash, your user should log in during 2 minutes. Unlike the token, also the authorization hash has a full access rights as user have. So you remember that I've said that token rights can be restrict user rights, and you can control it. But through authorization hash, the user will have the same rights as in Wialon. You can use this way, these options, for example, when it needs to provide additional access to, like, for example, to administrative functionalities of your applications. We have implemented the same way in our FleetRun app. The rights for working with basic functionality are limited by the token, because a user doesn't need to edit information or edit data or some sensitive data. But if necessary, if the administrator access is required, in this case, the authorization hash is used. So when user click to button to section and login as authorization user, the system in FleetRun app create for them authorization hash with full access, with full user access. So if you need the same for your app, you can use it. In conclusion, I would also like to tell you about another JavaScript library that you can use in your application. It's named Wialon JS API in small letters. It's available on GitHub. There will be a link in the description box below. You can find the link. And go to GitHub and look through this library. The advantage of this library is, compared to Wialon JavaScript API that we discussed above, is that there is not extra method, only the most necessary and frequently used ones. It also has some samples and more understandable parameters and even more simple parameters. Let's take a quick look. I will show you on my screen. Here, the link for this library, Wialon JS API. You can see the whole information about this library, which helps you to work with remote API methods. You can see their example, how to work with. You can also play and use the code, the example of code, like demo code for login, locator function, even for example with Angular framework. Below you can find the description of methods. For example, one useful option is that here you can specify, in example, not only one DNS for your server, for server URL. You can specify any kind of variables for different server URLs. So you can connect from one script, from one code to several servers which have different URLs. For example, ap.wialon.com for Wialon, other API, for example, for Wialon local, and so on, so on. And then you can create, because after you can create for each URL, each session. If we compare with Wialon JavaScript API, here you can create only one variable URL and connect only from one server and connect only from one session during in one file, in one code. But with this library, it's possible to connect to several servers to realize several connections. Then you can find the main and useful basic methods like get user sets, get user, get seed session, get current time, time zone locations, and so on. Method for events for session and other classes. So I think who are familiar with JavaScript libraries, this library will be very useful and convenient to use in your application. So let's take one more at our YouTube channel. Maybe we have some additional questions. Okay, there is not questions in YouTube channel, but from Facebook chat we have several questions about how to set up app name. Yeah, it's possible to set up app name using parameter client ID, which passed in URL to authorization form. So you can specify by default, the default value for client ID is the name of site monitoring, like for example hosting.wialon.com, but you can specify your app name. Okay. So I see there are no more questions left as far as I can see. And in any case, if you have any questions later, you can always write us on the forum, There will be a link in the description below the video. My email hd@gurtam.com is also available. If you have a small questions, our technical support @gurtam.com will also help you. Today's webinar was a brief overview about JS API use. We also discussed various libraries that can help you write code for your JS web app. Of course, you can also use just the remote API by making post requests from your web app. You can find all examples in the link in the description below. You can look through my code, my example of code. You can improve. You can use this code like a template and then improve it. You can play on the playground and use code templates and also improve it. So you're free to work with JavaScript API. Thank you for your attention and your interest. Sum up if the video was useful to you and subscribe to the Gurtam channel so as not to miss new videos. See you!